Thanks, Mike. It's always so much fun going looking for a story to tell at this concert. And sometimes it's always a surprise to me what I'm going to find. And this story I came across on the internet. I was looking for other stories to use in the Learning Through the Arts program. And I just blundered onto this lovely website with this Welsh fairy tale. And my husband and I had just been to Wales a couple of years ago. We were going in search of his Welsh roots. And also a friend of mine was singing in a choir that was competing at the Eisteddfod, the big music festival in Llangollen. And for weeks before we went, my husband and I went around the house going, Llangollen, Llangollen. I don't know if we've got it right yet. But anyway, when I came across this story and I saw it was full of words like that, I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. It's a fairy tale, though it's told as a true legend. But I have my doubts. Anyway, it's a story about the perils of marrying a fairy. It comes from northern Wales. We didn't get out to this part of Wales. We were in the south and in the east. But this one comes from the area out near Carnarvon, and it comes from a little village by the name of Bethgelert, which means the grave of the dog, and thereby hangs a long tale too, probably much too long to go into tonight, but I'll try to do it as briefly as I can. The dog in question, Gethert, belonged to Prince Llewellyn, who was the son-in-law of bad King John. And one day, when he was out of the house, he came back and found his favorite hunting dog, Gethert, with blood on his jaws, and he was filled with fear, of course, and went running around his house looking for his baby son and couldn't find him anywhere, and leaped to the conclusion that Gethert had indeed killed the baby son while he was out, and in a rage he stabbed the dog in the ribs with his sword and killed him. And then when he went up later to the child's room, he found the cradle upside down, and there was the child safe and sound, lying on the floor next to a dead wolf. His brave greyhound had killed the wolf, and he had mistakenly accused him of the deed. And he was so filled with remorse after that that he built a great memorial in this little village, and that is how it got the name. But I digress. Back to the story. In this village, the people there were very fond of going out of an evening to watch the fairies at their mirth and dancing and laughter in the woods on moonlit nights. And this was what people did before they had the 52-channel universe. And sometimes I think we're missing out on something here. And in the village, there was one particular young man who was bold and active and adventurous and just full of all those things that make youth so good. And he was very fond of going out every night the moon was out to watch the fairies at their dancing and singing. And one night, as he watched, there came into the midst of the fairies the most beautiful fairy lady he'd ever seen. She had skin like alabaster, and her voice, oh, it was like the nightingale. It was as sweet as the breezes that blow in the summer and rustle the leaves on the trees. And her step in the dance, why, that was as light as the sunbeams on the lake in the afternoon. And of course, he fell in love immediately and quite lost his head and rushed into the fairy tumult, into the middle of the dance, and seized that beautiful fairy lady and carried away to his own house. When the fairies saw one of their own torn away from them by such violence, they went in a fury after him. But when they got to his house, they found that he'd barred the door with iron. And if you know anything about fairies, you know they cannot pass a door that has been barred with iron. And they had to go away. There was nothing they could do about it. And inside, the young man pleaded and begged the fairy lady to marry him, but she would have none of it. And he kept her there for a long time. And other than tearing her away from her family, he wasn't such a bad youth. He was very good to her, gave her nice things to eat and brought her nice things to wear. And all the while he kept on pleading with her to marry him. And then one day she said, "I won't marry you, but I'll agree to this much. If you can guess my name, I'll be your servant. I'll look after your house. Your farm will prosper under my care. If you can guess my name." Well, the young man thought that wouldn't be so hard. And he started thinking about it. And he tried all the names he knew. Gwyneth, Gwendolen, Lilibet, Morgan, Isolde. Nothing. None of them were right. And then one day, when he was on his way home from Carnarvon Market, he came to a turbary. That's a peat bog where they cut peat. And he heard what sounded to him like the sound of fairy voices. And he thought, if those fairies, if they are fairies, are related to my beloved, and I can get near to them, perhaps I will learn something of use. He saw that there was a ditch that led into the turbary, so he got down on his hands and knees and crawled along the ditch and into the turbary until he could just hear the fairy voices. And indeed, they were talking about his own beloved. And he heard one of them say, "Ah, Penelope, 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 why didst thou run off with a mortal and leave us here so alone?" Penelope, he thought, that must be her name. And he crawled back down the ditch and ran back to his house, threw open the door, and called out, "Penelope, my beloved, Penelope!" She came into the room. Oh, alas, who has betrayed me?" she said. "What person has given you my name?" But the deed was done. She had to work for him now. And a good worker she was. There was no farm there that had a housekeeper as good as she was. The house was the cleanest in the whole neighborhood, and the farm prospered, and things went very well. And after some time, the young man continuing on with his case for her to marry him, she finally came to the conclusion that perhaps it wouldn't be so bad after all. He was a handsome and pleasant young fellow. And she agreed. She agreed that she'd marry him on one condition. He must never touch her with iron, for if he did, why, that would give her the right to go back to her own people. And of course he agreed with that condition. How could he ever touch her with iron? How could he hurt her? He loved her so he would never harm her. He was sure of that thing, that one thing. And so they married, and they were very happy for several years. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, the image of their mother, the idols of their father. But then one day, the young farmer had to go to Carnarvon Market to sell a filly, a young unbroken filly that he had. So he went out to the pasture to catch this horse. And the horse ran all around the pasture, evading him at every turn. And so he called to his wife to come out and help him catch the filly. And she agreed at once, and she came right out. And they both followed the horse until they had it cornered in a paddock, right in the corner, in what looked like a secure place from which it couldn't escape. And they were just about to lay hold of it by the mane when it broke free and ran. The young farmer was so frustrated, he picked up the bridle he had in his hand and threw it after the horse. Unfortunately, his wife was running in the same direction as the horse, and the bridle struck her on the cheek. The iron bit struck her on the cheek, and in an instant, she vanished and was gone. And he didn't see her again. Time passed. And he was very, very sad. And then one night he heard a kind of rubbing or scratching at the windowsill. He looked, but he really couldn't see anything but shadows. But then he thought he heard a voice, and it sounded like the voice of his wife. Lest my son should find it cold, put on him your great gray coat. Lest my dear one find it cold, put on her my petticoat. It is said that the descendants of those two still live in that area, and that you will have no difficulty recognizing them for the fairness of their skin and the lightness of their step in the dance. Thank you very much.
Elinor Benjamin. Thank you, Elinor. Thank you very much, Elinor Benjamin.